Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk all about caster. So caster is effectively made up of two parts. You've got the kick-up at the inside, which sets the angle of the arms, and then you've got any additional caster which is added at the C-hubs at the end. When you add those two things together, you get the total caster. Now, the total caster basically just describes how far leant back the steering axis is from the vertical. Now when I adjust the caster, I prefer to just change it in the hubs, and I try and leave the kick-up the same on the inside. This is because I've found before that when you change the kick-up, it changes so many different aspects of how the front end works that the car can just kind of fall out of its working range a little bit. It can start to roll differently, behave very differently to it did before. So I like to try and stick with the same kick-up on the inside and then just change the caster by changing the hub inserts in the hubs. This way, it's just a more consistent change. You don't really change everything about how the car moves and rolls. You just change the steering feel from changing the caster. And I find that to be a better way of doing it. Now also, when you change the caster, you've got to make sure that you readjust the bump steer, because when you change the angle of the hubs, you raise that plate up, the steering plate, and it can mess up the way the bump steer is. So kind of like I explained in the last video, you'll need to readjust the spacers on the steering plate or raise or lower the rack in order to make sure that the bump steer stays the same as it was before. So when you change the caster, you change a lot of things. You change the angle of the tyres to the track as you steer, you change the trail, you change the jacking force at the front. But what does all this do on the track when you actually put it together? Well, generally, if you reduce the caster, your car's going to feel a little bit more consistent on the front end, probably more linear to drive. However, you might lose a little bit of mid-corner and exit steering. When you increase the caster, it's the opposite. You can gain mid and exit steering, but this can make it feel sometimes like it's hooking or just coming in when you don't expect it in the corner. So possibly a less linear, easy to drive steering feel, but probably a little bit more steering overall. So one of the main changes for the B6.4 from the old B6.3 platform was the kick-up of the chassis. Originally the kick-up on the chassis was 27.5 degrees on the 0.3, it's now 22.5 degrees on the B6.4. So if you want to run 25 kick-up like you did on the 0.3, you'll need to run the plus 2.5 to the front. If you want to run 20, you'll run the minus 2.5 to the front. Where it can get a bit confusing is if you have an old bulkhead off the B6.3 that says 30 and 25, you need to effectively minus 5 off those numbers now. So if you want to run 25 degrees kick-up, you'll need to run the 30 to the front, and if you want to run 20, you'll need to run the 25 to the front. And that's just because those bulkheads were made for the old car where the chassis was different. It's the same bulkhead, just has different numbers on. So that's that. Me and Tommy almost always run 25 on the inside and 5 on the outside, so have a total caster of 30 degrees. We just find this is a good steering feel in almost all conditions, always feels like it works well, but you just need to try it, have a mess around, see what you think, what works well at your track and where you're racing. So yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed the video, hopefully that's something else you can have a play with now to adjust the steering feel of the car, and we'll see you in the next one.